Um, Hello, good morning to everyone. Um, I'm told we are filmed, so good morning to the people who might be watching now. Um, my name is Miguel González Sancho. I am from the European Commission, working in DG Connect, where I am head of unit for cybersecurity technology. In this session today, about security in a digital world. The purpose is as with other sessions, as part of the consultation on future priorities for the Cluster 3 of Horizon Europe program, in particular the cybersecurity area. It is to, the purpose, as I said, of the session, it is to have some discussion, some interaction. From my side, I will just like to introduce the discussion before handing over to our three speakers that will make some points to then stimulate the discussion that will follow with you. From my side, very quickly, I just would like to put things in context and to recall that cybersecurity, security in a digital world, as the title of the session goes, it's getting more and more important everywhere. At policy level, at European policy level, it's certainly higher on the political agenda than it was 5 years ago. The new Commission that is in the process of being assessed by the Parliament and hopefully will enter in office by the 1st of November, has two top priorities. One is the green society and economy, and the other is digital. And in digital, certainly, the cybersecurity is at the center. There is a sentence in the political guidelines of the president-elect of the future president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, that goes digitization and cybersecurity are two sides of the same coin. I think it's quite telling. In this area of European Union policy, the goal is basically to find the right balance between, what you could call national security considerations, but then at the same time innovation and industrial capabilities. There is an increasing acknowledgement of the need to cooperate in this area, because it's just too complex, to evolving too fast. I'm talking about innovation and research, but as well at political level. There's different instruments for cooperation. There's legislation coming up recently in this area. NIS Directive, Cybersecurity Act, recently adopted, setting up a European framework for certification on cybersecurity. There's reinforced policy cooperation with recommendations on managing cyber threats, on 5G security, and well, those are a bit. That's a bit of the background information. There's, that's for background. These slides will be available afterwards on the site of the event, and of course, there's European funding for this area. Horizon 2020, but also Connecting Europe Facility. I'm not going to go into all that. So this is background. This is just to say that there's been support, different calls on cybersecurity under Horizon 2020 since 2014 and before under the previous programs. And I just want to say, as I said, I just want to say that there's a call which is currently open still till November, I think, and there will be more calls in 2020 opening in March with different topics on cybersecurity. But now today the focus is, Horizon 2020 is still ongoing, of course, with support for this area. But the focus is on Horizon Europe and the future program. So the consultation is still open, and this is part of the consultation process. It has been extended. By the way, there is a consultation on the other program that is not research and innovation, which is the Digital Europe program, which has also a priority on cybersecurity. And the consultation, similarly of orientations, is still open. Okay, enough from me. I think I've exhausted my time. As I say, all that information will be available. You've seen what is the focus of the session, which is on research and innovation results for cybersecurity products and services to get on the market with respect to security and privacy. So the setting for today is, after my introduction, we have our 3 speakers that will speak for 5 minutes each, to stimulate a bit the discussion later, and then the room will be opened for interaction, for questions. Again, I recall the purpose is to gather input in the context of this consultation, public consultation, about future priorities for Horizon Europe in this particular area, security, in particular, digital aspects. So I will stop there. I will ask the speakers to just briefly introduce themselves and then go on with their 5 minutes pitches. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. My name is Liisa Paast, and I'm currently the Chief National Cyber Risk Officer for the Estonian Government Office. So just like scientists, often the people in the room saying, but what about logic and reason? I'm the person in one of the most digitally advanced societies in the world who says, hey, what about security? Let's get it figured out. And just like you referred, digitalization and security are the flip sides of the same coin. You can, of course, do security, and particularly cybersecurity, as an afterthought, but it's about 50 times more expensive if you don't do it by design, if you don't do it as part of your original scope of innovation and digitalization often. And I'll talk about how I see governments being able to foster a livelier research community, and what, as a government, where I really appreciate the research community and scientists stepping up in places where simply all other structures fail. This audience does not need to be convinced that cybersecurity, the fundamental security of our digital way of life, is important. But rather the question, and the question that Horizon 2020 so much addresses, is how to create better cooperation and better synergies between government, academia, the market, and of course the European Union. As often these different communities and then tribes within those communities have lived in very convenient self-imposed silos. You know, oh, it's technical, you don't need to understand it. It's really shorthand for leave me alone, I don't want to talk to you. And that's leading us to a less secure world. First of all, I think both governments and sometimes the corporate sector have been naive in our demands of the research community and expected those focused on the fundamental science of things, be it cryptography, be it secure connections, be it how we exchange signals that underlie modern communications, to also commercialize their work. And that simply is not realistic. I don't know of a single case in the world where the fundamental scientist, the person in the lab, the person leading a research group, has also led a successful marketization by themselves. These roles are contradictory and different, and rather, as EU and then as those creating environments in member states, we need to focus on how to build an entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem around science, and how to foster transfer rather than, pick a scientist up and shake them until something marketable falls out of them, since that really has not worked very well. And secondly, the fundamental role of scientists in the security world is responsible disclosure. If you find out that something's broken, and I have a war story, a happy war story, stop for a second, you think how your finding also impacts the world. In late August 2 years ago, I was in Rome for a romantic late summer city break. But this isn't the story of that. This is a story of a group of crypto researchers at the Masaryk University in the Czech Republic, led by Peter Svenda, sending notification to the Estonian government, basically saying that the RSA crypto library that underlies how we create the private key of our national identity scheme is implemented in a broken way. Simply put, because of an engineering mistake of a vendor to our vendor, so 2 steps, if not 3 steps down the supply chain, the private key generation of what underlies everything we do digitally, how we both authenticate people and sign digitally, the randomness of that ran out of randomness. It's nothing we could have controlled. We implemented the best industry standard. It's nothing we could have demanded from our supplier. They fulfilled their contract. Yet 2 steps down the line, the industry standard was broken. It wasn't just broken for us. It was broken for about 2 billion chips also used in trusted platform modules. So, the fundamental of modern security architecture, and in security tokens, in particular in virtual private networks, in VPN solutions. But our 600,000 chips out of the about 2 billion out there in the world were the only ones that had both a government warranty, government backing saying this is secure, but also had an ecosystem of thousands of digital services relying on them. And what we found out was that all other notification mechanisms had failed us. Our supplier did not notify us. Whether they knew or they didn't know is being discussed in court right now. But the fact is we never found out from the supplier who should have notified us. The European notification mechanisms, those around the eIDAS, failed us because the notification mechanism isn't specific enough to demonstrate vulnerabilities that are in the very shared basic architecture, such as the crypto libraries. So the only community that didn't fail us was that research group in the Czech Republic. And that gave us probably 3 to 4 months to fix the issue before there could have been an exploit, before this vulnerability could have been taken advantage of. So really, given the fundamental role of the European Union in fostering this very secure approach, Miguel, as you said, there's 2 things that I, as a government representative, ask for. One is recognition that we can't just shake good ideas out of researchers, but we need to create an ecosystem to foster it. And secondly, that researchers do the responsible thing in terms of responsible disclosure, be it vulnerabilities or be it other parts of innovation. And besides cryptography, there's the issues of supply chain, 5G, building secure ecosystems in which we cannot do it as governments by ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. So clear messages there. Alexei, your turn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alexei Kirichenko. I work at F-Secure, responsible for research collaboration at F-Secure. It's a Finnish cybersecurity provider. Some people say that this is the largest purely cybersecurity company in Europe, which may be the case. We are a little bit under 2,000 people. Thanks very much for inviting to the panel. Let me start with a simple disclaimer. What I'm going to do in the coming 5 minutes is like raising concerns and sharing issues rather than making very hard statements. My first point is in Horizon call statements, depth and breadth should be in proper balance. What I mean is that now we see more calls with really many requirements from really multiple domains. And that has a danger of diluting the focus. It also forces consortia to spend significant amount of time on just providing coherent stories, which in my view is sort of a waste of human creativity. The other part of the problem, because you have to meet requirements from many domains, that forces consortia to have essentially like one partner per domain of expertise. And that means in the real project work, the collaboration happens mainly just on the level of integrations on interfaces, which is not always optimal. Moving to the next point, what's a typical time span between the point when you begin working on your proposal seriously and when the actual project work starts? Of course, if your proposal is successful. That's typically around 1 year. And then you still have 3 years of the project ahead of you. For many mid-sized and small companies, this is an issue. Their planning horizons are very short, and making longer-term commitments is problematic for them. They have to be agile. And also cybersecurity, it's a very rapidly evolving field, often driven by attackers. And because of that, problems which are perfectly relevant today may not be so relevant after 1 year. I'm not even talking about after 2 or 3 years. Moving to the next point, to increase the impact of research and innovation project results, it's very important that consortia, proposals of which are selected for funding, they have proper access to relevant data, technologies, problem understanding. This isn't always the case. I think consortia sometimes are rather opportunistically optimistic in their promises, not really thinking where they would take data, how good the data would be, and matters of that type. And then the project outcomes, they may not really have very high practical value. I think this is one of the issues why the impact is not probably as high as it could be. The next point that I want to mention is about the use of artificial intelligence in cybersecurity. There is this Explainable AI, which has become very popular, very fashionable recently. In a pursuit of explainable AI, could it be that we actually lose some of the AI power for cybersecurity, some of the AI value for cybersecurity? Of course, we want to use artificial intelligence in ethical ways. There is no question about that. But when we insist on things, for example, like explainability, could it be that we may not be able to deliver proper security? And then it becomes a really difficult choice. When you talk to practitioners, they often raise concerns like this. And maybe my final point is about validation of the research and innovation results. Validation in cybersecurity is a notoriously difficult problem. It's very hard to validate. Consortia really often struggle with defining their KPIs and explaining how they validate results. I think this deserves much more attention than it has today, how you validate the results of your research. And that, of course, directly influences the intake of those research results to practical use. Of course, we do invest quite a bit in cyber ranges, but we have to remember that cyber ranges are kind of an enabler for validation methodologies and approaches. And methodologies and approaches, they require more attention. And I just want to conclude by acknowledging the role of European cybersecurity organization, EXO, which I think succeeded in creating a stimulated environment for people to discuss priorities in research and innovation, ways of working, and all that. I think EXO really helped quite a bit to the cybersecurity community in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Alexei. So now we will go to our third speaker, Stephanie. Yeah. Please.
My name is Stephanie Vina. I'm a professor at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. I also work at QTech, which is a Dutch mission-driven institute where I lead the division on quantum internet and network computing. So now you're probably wondering, given that this is a cybersecurity panel, what is this quantum person doing on this panel? So quantum actually has impact on security. On the one hand, it can be a threat in the sense that algorithms that we use today, for example RSA, can be broken once a quantum computer becomes available. And that's important already now, because you can imagine that someone will record your data and then later use the quantum computer in order to break security. On the other hand, quantum technology is, however, also an opportunity, in the sense that quantum communication makes it possible to do quantum secure communication using quantum key distribution that is secure even if the attacker has a quantum computer. There's also a very exciting initiative now in the Digital Europe program called EuroQCI for quantum communication infrastructure, where the objective is actually to bring that technology into Europe to secure critical infrastructures in Europe. So I'm going to focus on Horizon Europe, of course, on this panel. And I want to structure my pitch around two important questions. And the first one is, what can Europe do to build an internationally competitive quantum security research environment? And there, I think there's two important things, and there's many, but I want to mention two. The first is that I think it is very important to continue to engage in high-risk funding, also in the domain of security and quantum technologies. So with this, I mean that also ERC projects, for example, I think the ERC has made an important contribution to attract and foster excellence in Europe in the domain of quantum technologies, which can now go out and actually try and make them a reality. So the second point is, which I think you already also mentioned, is that I think it's extremely important to make research and development infrastructures available for security researchers and innovators in Europe. Because, you know, quantum technologies also always seem a lot of foreign, I guess also to a lot of you here in this room. So the question is a little bit, we are building all these cool quantum technology things. For example, quantum key distribution that can produce encryption keys. But we would like this technology to become actually used. So if you're a company that, for example, builds VPN solutions, you may wish to develop a new software product that integrates that key into your VPN system. You may be a security researcher who wants to understand, well, what is actually, how secure is this quantum system really in the general context of a larger security environment? You may be a security professional who is interested in developing a security policy on how quantum secure communication is actually used in a company. So these things are extremely difficult to do if you don't have access to the actual technology. And for that reason, I think it's very important to create research and innovation hubs where such equipment is available and deployed for people to both perform research and innovations on that infrastructure. So I told you that I have a second question. So what is now my second question? So the second question is, what can Europe now do to take that excellent research and translate it into technology, preferably in such a way that Europe is in fact competitive internationally in that space? And this, of course, is an extremely difficult and complex question that we could be discussing for several hours. But I want to focus it down to actually a very specific one. So, of course, it's very important to have both small and large-scale funding. And again, I want to make this example of quantum technologies or quantum secure communication. So some things can be achieved by small-scale funding, where one has a system that is already relatively high TRL, and you want to push it into industry or the market. On the other hand, there's, let me call them the moonshot goals, the really difficult things. So quantum secure communication is a reality now at around 100 kilometers in deployed fiber. But it is extremely complicated to go long distance on the ground. And this is an extremely hard R&D effort. And I personally think this cannot be achieved by small-scale projects in Europe, but a large and focused effort is required that integrates both research and engineering. So to motivate this a little bit, let me actually give you a little bit of international context on the domain of quantum technologies, and in particular also in quantum communication. So I think it's fair to say that Europe is actually presently still slightly ahead when it comes to advanced quantum networking on the ground. So enabling ultimately long-distance quantum communication in fiber. So of course we are not alone in the world, but there's also other entities like the US and China. In the US, the quantum technology effort is driven a lot by companies, for example, US, IBM, and IBM, Google, and Intel, who have, as you probably heard from the media, a very large-scale effort, especially focused on the domain of quantum computing. And I think that they are very focused efforts that they have conducted actually also led to the fact that now you really have quantum chips which have decent sizes, which you can even already access online. On the side of China, China has, of course, also some companies, but I think their efforts are mainly driven by public funding, where they have invested many billions of euros, especially also in the domain of quantum communication. So the question is, of course, how can we in the future be competitive in that space? So how can we take the slight lead that we have right now in advanced networking on the ground and actually translate it to sort of leading technology in Europe? And I think for this reason, of course, there's efforts that have been established, for example, in the EU flagship, which has made a good start, but which is still currently structured around relatively small projects. And I think the next step is actually to adopt also a model that now the US is exploring, where one creates research and engineering centers in Europe to create a very focused effort to really bring the technology from low TRL to a high TRL, where it can then actually also be engaged with industry. Yeah. So this is one important point that I wanted to make. And there's one last small point that I want to add, that also relates to the question, how can Europe be competitive internationally and how can research become technology? So there's, of course, I think also in the quantum flagship, you see an engagement of various large companies whose commitment to the cause is not always very large. So I would like to make a plea to have a strong support for actually new startups who put their life on the line in order to make their startup a success. And for them, for who it is completely critical, in fact, who are committed to bringing the technology in the market, instead of making this sort of a side project on the side. So this is all I wanted to say. Happy to answer any quantum questions.
Thank you very much to all three of you for this enlightening and complementary observations. So now we actually in this session there's roughly half an hour for other people to intervene. So that can be in reaction to what you just heard. That can be in reaction to the orientations paper, or any other observation in the framework of the focus of this session, which is of course focus on future research and innovation in this area of cybersecurity. Let's say, I would like to open the floor. Our speakers had a hard time with 5 minutes each. I would like to give even a harder time to people in the audience. If you could make your intervention in 30, 40 seconds, that would be great. And starting with saying who you are, who you work for. So, who is the courageous person in the room who wants to make a first intervention? Kai.
Thanks a lot, Kai Rannenberg. Sorry, Goethe University Frankfurt, coordinator of CyberSec for Europe, one of the pilots for the Competence Center. Very many important points that you've raised. One thing that I'm wondering is missing, how do we get the European citizen with us? How do we make clear that the European citizen profits from more cybersecurity? And I see two main areas where I would like to see your views. The one thing is And how do we make sure that the platforms that the European citizen is using every day, like what I'm surfing with, what I'm doing my day-to-day telephone calls with, to make sure that that is secure, and that when we make a statement about its security, and we discussed already the supply chain an issue in the Estonian card scenario, how can we make sure that we can make statements that people can rely on? And the other big question is, how do we make sure that the enhanced cybersecurity that we are having is not killing people's privacy and people's freedom to do what they need to do? Because we know quite a few security mechanisms, of course, they can be quite difficult for privacy, especially everything that is around auditing and tracking and so on.
Thanks a lot. Well, these are, of course, very top challenges that to be addressed. I don't know if anybody from the panel has an immediate reaction.
I would actually very quickly thank you for highlighting, I think, the fundamental issue policy-wise in the privacy and security world for Europe, which is that May last year, both the NIS directive and GDPR went into force. And they're often seen as two separate mechanisms, one on the technical and the other one on the legal privacy side. Whereas in implementation, especially if you're a mid-size organization, government, private, or academic, you're using the same tools for different ends to assure compliance. So I think one of the silos that needs to be broken down, and that Europe itself has created for its own convenience, is the privacy security silo, whereas both for the citizen and often for the person implementing it, it's the same tool serving different ends. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you. Any other? Alexei, you want to?
Maybe I also have a very brief comment. Of course, your questions are extremely generic and very painful concerning how people really use cybersecurity technologies. There are clearly two complementary ways. One is educate people, another make products more human-friendly, more user-friendly, right? Those are, of course, two sides of the same coin. And I think education is absolutely necessary. No matter how much effort you put into making those friendly and security usable, if people do not understand, they will not benefit, or do not benefit like in full extent. So education is very important, and this is, I wouldn't say hopeless, but extremely difficult. You can't easily force people to educate themselves. But of course, that's where an effort is required. That's very clear.
Please.
Thank you. I'm Peter van der Maas from Utrecht University. Well, I don't know who addressed this question, and I also realize it's quite an impossible question, but still I want to make it. If you talk about cybersecurity and security in general, and we talk about societies, there is a bit of a contradiction in the ambition to save digital communication, digital platforms, and the open structure of societies and the accessibility of open institutions. There is a contradiction in my point of view, and most of the SSH research point to the fact that if you want to maintain an open democracy, open access to open institutions is very important. So where is the balance, I'm wondering?
Yeah, Alexei.
That's, of course, also a difficult question. If you talk with security engineers, they say everything should be based on proper access control. Right, this is the good way to instill security. And of course, access control makes things less open. I still think access control is necessary in many systems. Without that, probably we wouldn't have any security. Of course, you have to have a balance between how sort of strict you are from the security point of view and how open you are from the human point of view. And what the right balance is really is very heavily context dependent. So I don't think there are any universal answers.
But I'm just pointing to the fact how the development in China is going, where digital technologies actually are in that way put to the government, that there is no freedom for moving and freedom of mind. Well, it's anyhow difficult in China, of course, but I don't want this situation in Europe also.
So that's why I strongly believe that the illusion of sort of isolated security needs to be overcome. In this global world, on the level of architecture and on the level of systems, let alone societies, we cannot continue to live under the false illusion that we can secure just one society in Europe, or we can secure just one system in Europe or one service in Europe, but rather the aggressive strategy of transparency is the best security policy. We have to know the inconvenient truth of there's no 100% security, the threats are cross-border, the threats are similar across the rule of law-based societies. Once you acknowledge that, you also realize that across these similarly values-based societies, if we're not transparent, the autocratic societies will gain dominance. And we need to be transparent, and we need to be very, very open exactly for that reason on architecture level.
Well, this is a fascinating, rather philosophical topic that's very important. There's different ways of going about cybersecurity and about artificial intelligence, for that matter. And there's different models with embedded choices. What I want to say when it comes to research, it is quite important also when putting forward proposals to actually, address this issue because it's in the background. Actually, there's different ways of going about this and of going about managing data and what have you. That's something that research needs to address. And as I said, there's different models in the world, and when I refer to artificial intelligence, for instance, we're trying to go about it with particular choices embedded. Thanks. Any other? Yeah, Roberto.
Camille Dornier, ASN.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
Yes, Camille Dornier, ASN. My question relates to the
Who are you, sorry?
Communication infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Can you just say who you are?
Camille Dornier, ASN, Alliance for Digital Trust.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know, because as far as I know, but please correct me if I'm wrong, 10 countries signed an agreement to set up this quantum communication infrastructure. So I just wanted to know 10 out of 28, and the infrastructure is supposed to cover the entire EU. So do you think there is the same will from all member states to have this quantum communication infrastructure? Or do you think it's just a matter of time to gain the support from all member states?
So I know that I mentioned the quantum communication infrastructure, but I don't actually think that I'm the right person to answer that question.
Well, actually, I'm not the right person either, but I'm from the European Commission, so I will try. So you must be referring to the declaration that was signed by several countries not so long ago. This is not first. I mean, this happens in other areas of European cooperation, where certain countries decide, to go ahead, without waiting. But of course, always the idea is to, and that's clear in the declaration from what I remember, it's open for others to join. But it's important, not 28, sometimes not everybody can move at the same speed. That would be the aspect. As we saw also with the Euro HPC efforts, it started with a smaller number of countries, and then others joined later. That's the idea. Roberto, yeah, and then I'll take it. First here, yeah.
So I'm Roberto Cascella from the European Cybersecurity Organization, EXO.
Yeah, microphone ideally.
I'm quite loud, so
but not video for internet.
We want louder.
Okay, so I'm Roberto Cascella from European Cybersecurity Organization, EXO. So thanks a lot for your comments. So I will just jump into a little bit the discussion. So Kai mentioned something about the citizen. So that is one important component that we need to consider. And clearly the fundamental rights and the policy is going to intervene to do that. So we need to have research and then policy enforcing and protecting the citizen on one side. There is clearly the depth, maybe moving more toward the market with also facilitating with platform and so on. And you mentioned like different kind of technologies like quantum computing, quantum communication, 5G, artificial intelligence has been mentioned. There are other like blockchain, IoT, and so on. So, but if you like to do an investment to address, you mentioned the issue about supply chain, trusted supply chain that should cover a little bit all the needs linked to the cities and the industry. What, in your view, is important to address from the research point of view, and not just have like a fragmented approach, but more a comprehensive, let's say, structured investment in something that could really enhance like Europe and then facilitate, like help citizens and the different industries. Thank you.
I mean, the biggest problem of supply chains in the world is universal dependency on a unique technology. In other words, a single point of failure. So the simplest answer to your question is you should never prioritize a single technology, because then you become hostage to it.
Yeah. So I can add something in the quantum domain, where actually there's the need for an extremely large supply chain. So to make quantum technologies a sort of long-distance quantum communication on the ground a reality, which is an R&D effort, it does not yet exist. There's a massive supply chain that is needed to make both components, for example, photon sources, certain laser systems. There's a massive amount of effort that is needed to do engineering, for example, on the control plane, where one needs then again a totally different supply chain that also comes from sort of classical networks, for example, to do timing synchronization. Then, to make it actually useful for something, one also needs a software supply chain. One needs research, in fact, in the classical security domain to integrate it, to develop security policies. So there's an extremely large space that needs to be covered by many different people.
Okay, there was a question in the back.
Sorry,
Alexei, excuse me.
If I still comment on the security of supply chains, I think Lisa's point that you shouldn't be dependent on a single technology, that's generally a good point. But from the supply chain perspective, I don't think this is a solution, because it's enough to break someone in the supply chain who uses a technology which is breakable and then penetrate the attack to the other parts of the supply chain. I think another big problem is when you speak about supply chain security, you typically have multiple security technologies and multiple security providers who manage security of various parts of the supply chain. And the information exchange, intelligence exchange becomes very important, which is usually very slow and sometimes doesn't work at all. Someone is broken and nobody knows about that for a long time until the others start to be broken. So to me, this is a lot about intelligence exchange.
Okay. Please, first in the back.
Mikko Merimaa from VTT Finland. And I continue with the topic of the Euro QCI. It is now in the phase when the declaration or memorandum of understanding is being signed by the member states. But how do you see that this initiative will develop further after the signature of this declaration?
Quantum? No.
Yeah, so it's about quantum. So,
the memorandum?
So I can answer questions which are technical, but I think Miguel should speak on anything that relates to the European Commission. So on the technical side, it is very natural actually to start in different member states where actually distances are short. And there have also been some discussions actually on what this could look like. What does it mean to secure critical infrastructure in different member states, which could then be connected into a Europe-wide network in later phases of this project. Yeah. So maybe Miguel wants to add something from the...
So can you repeat the question about the memorandum? Because I didn't get what the question was.
Yes, I already got a partial answer,
Okay.
which was from the technical side,
Yeah.
but also from the, let's say, administrative side. It would be interesting to know that what are the actions after the memorandum is signed to actually advance the initiative from the political side or from the Commission side?
I don't know the details. I just know that it is foreseen indeed to support the next steps, in particular, through the Horizon Europe program as well as the Digital Europe program. So there will be that support from that side. I don't know the details, as I said, but as far as I know, there's a follow-up with these countries that have signed. There's a process that is accompanied, and we have also within the Commission, with the two DGs most concerned, so I Connect and DG Grow. We are following this up. There is also a memorandum that was signed with the European Space Agency, for that matter. So covering the space side and the terrestrial side. This is as far as my knowledge of the details go. Of course, there's a dedicated unit in our DG who works on that, and more information on the web, to which I would refer you to. Question here in the front. Thank you.
Thank you. Marceline Dupré, TU Delft. A different question regarding the last remark of Stephanie Rayner, that SMEs, that extra startups are needed, new startups. Besides initiatives of individual countries like Spain next week, what's the policy of the Commission? Does the Commission organize also events to enhance this in Europe as a whole?
For cyber or more broadly?
For example, on quantum.
Quantum and SMEs. Stephanie, can you help there?
Well, I don't think I can make statements about what the Commission is doing.
But you know about it, because I don't know anything specific about SMEs and quantum.
So I should say that I'm not aware of any specific initiative targeted at startups, except that they can, of course, be part of projects. But that, of course, is slightly different. In the sense, and I think also startups are not always in a very good situation to immediately go into a project.
So it might be...
Yeah, Monica comes to the rescue.
Well, just to get some element from the open calls that the projects have. So this is an engagement where currently running projects are trying to reach out, and possibilities there for SMEs to engage in such open calls is an example how this could be done. And maybe just to go back to go quickly back to the question that was asked earlier on quantum, and now the member states, actually it's a joint effort, of course, with the member states, and now the member states were asked to collect the activities, the roadmaps, to collect the developments that they will have until the end of the year, and bring this together to a joint roadmap. So it's not so much the funding alone, but it's also a policy question on quantum, what these member states want to do together. So this is there was a workshop actually last week here in Brussels, where from the permanent representations and from governments, people came together and they discussed exactly that. And another point there is that they need to work on the governance. So that is the next steps that they are going to take.
Thank you. There's first the back. You raised your hand a bit earlier, and then front, and then back again.
Good morning. My name is Laurent Zibel. I work for Industry All European Trade Union, which is the European Federation of Trade Unions in Manufacturing. I would like to know what the specific requirements are regarding cybersecurity to ensure, say, the integrity of data transmission and storage within companies and between companies in supply chains. Because, I mean, the ultimate goal of Industry 4.0 and in the industrial Internet of Things is to have, I would say, a global connectivity of players in supply chains with intense data flows in between. And all this needs to be maintained, needs to be preserved against eavesdropping and also against falsifications and sabotage in different ways.
Perhaps we take this. Is there three, one more or two more, and then yes, you were, please. It was here, I think, and then you.
Question on the ecosystem for taking the lead in deploying, key technologies such as quantum computing. What's your view on, the lack of European champion? Take Amazon, Google, Microsoft. How can we achieve the critical mass without, having a champion in these areas? I'm talking about digital platforms.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Emmanuel Isambert from European Aviation Safety.
And then perhaps, because time is running, last question in the back, and we take these questions.
Good morning, my name is Nick Delmere. I have a background in logistics, meaning supply chains, transport, warehousing, customs. So, like the gentleman, more or less in line with the gentleman's remark, all is about data pipelines between the different parties and autonomous sailing, autonomous trucking, what have you. So, cybersecurity becomes more important. And if we did not make enough progress yet, it is because of data privacy and data security. Now, I'm not a researcher, I don't write proposals, but we are involved in proposals. And as far as I know, I don't see in any of the calls cybersecurity as a topic. There is data security requests to cover that topic, but not as such cybersecurity. So one question is, wouldn't it be wise to ask specifically in project calls for mobility for growth area to focus a bit more on cybersecurity than it is today, which would help then in spreading the word in making audiences a bit more aware? That's question number one. Number two, addressed to Stephanie. I know in TU Delft, there is a certain Professor Yawatan, who is heavily involved in digitalizing supply chains. He talks to digitising every day, so it's a key topic. People in EXO, a certain Mark Miller, is heavily involved in that area too. I was wondering in TU Delft how you collaborate with the department of Professor Tan, where you could already cross-fertilize what's happening in your field with what's happening in supply chains. Do you do that? Question mark.
Okay, thank you. So there were actually 4 questions. So let's recall. From my side, the question about integrity of data exchanged between companies. I'm not aware. When it comes to confidentiality, of course, privacy, GDPR. When it comes to availability, we are setting up a data flow, let's say, a regulatory approach. About data integrity, which was specifically your question, I'm not aware of legislation that would exist. Probably other people can help to guarantee that. Ecosystem, having European champions, that's what we all are after, actually. Tough question. And then there was the issue of not cybersecurity calls. Well, it depends on what you refer as cybersecurity, but because in my understanding, there's quite a few calls on cybersecurity. I went through the slides very quickly, and there are more coming up, but it comes in different shapes and angles. But cybersecurity is certainly in research calls. You mentioned that in your question something about mobility for growth, if I understood right. There was also a call actually on that some time ago. But then perhaps we can catch up on this specific thing afterwards. Then there was a question specifically for Stephanie, but let's take it as a package. So the issue of integrity, if you have something to comment, how to create European champions, and then your specific question for Stephanie regarding Delft University. Who wants to start?
Maybe just want to mention that with the deadline in November, there is an open call now on the security of supply chains. So this is definitely not neglected, and I'm pretty sure many consortia are working towards that call.
to?
Yeah, so I will answer your question, and then I will also make a comment on the European champions in the quantum space. So let me first ask this question of whether we are already collaborating with Professor Tam. So at QTech, we are quite a large effort. Actually, we are over 200 people at QTech. In the networking division, we are a bit more than 60 people. We work in Europe with more than 32 partners. Also in the Netherlands, we have, which are both from academia and industry. So in the industry space, I think we're working currently with more than 25 entities. For example, in the Netherlands, also with the Dutch telecom operator KPN. Of course, I think it's very interesting to explore new collaborations, but we're not currently collaborating with my colleague in the other domain. So maybe now let me actually say something about this question about European champions. In the sense that I don't think one should be that pessimistic, in the sense that this is in principle not possible. For example, in the domain of advanced networking on the ground, we currently hold several world records, including, for example, having the highest quantum link efficiency in the world, which measures how fast you can produce entanglement in relation to how fast it's lost due to storage imperfections. We've also sort of developed various sort of key control technologies, for example, the world's first link layer protocol. We've done a lot of things. I think also at QTech we have a situation which I think could be a very good model for also other efforts in Europe, in the sense that we have an integration, because QTech is a collaboration between the university and an RTO. We have an extremely strong integration between the research and the engineering side that we can build upon. And that's super valuable for us. And I think if you want to have European champions in the quantum domain, then you need to have a model where you say, okay, we're going to have a few focus places where there is a strong integration between research and engineering, because you need the engineering to actually push this. You cannot do this by just writing papers. That is just not the right model to advance to high TRL. While, of course, also having a sort of more flat funding for research to connect to these European champions in Europe.
I'm afraid I have a terribly unsatisfactory answer to all 3 or 4 questions, which maybe also hints at me needing a career outside of government, which is that the main answer to most of the sets of issues you raised is actually the effective implementation of standards, and in particular the role of Europe could have in certification, both for governments and industry. Whether those baseline standards are the ISO 27000 family, or whether it's a national standard, particularly the German IT Grundschutz. And for me, that's key, both in wider industry, having Europe as a champion of the industry. As long as we, as a market of 28 countries, do not set the clear standards and have clearly defined certification procedures behind it, someone else, and hopefully the United States, but possibly some of the biggest growth economies, will be setting the practical standards for the products European citizens will be using. And the same goes to your question about integrity of supply chains. Cybersecurity has 3 elements, not just integrity, but also confidentiality and availability. And, again, it's the role of the security standards that balances between those 3 elements in a way that's appropriate to the particular function. So, terribly unsatisfactory, but really standards and certification. And that's something for Europe to figure out yesterday.
Okay, thanks a lot. We have time for a very last question, a quick one.
Maybe I can comment more on...
we have time for 2 quick questions then, but they have to be quicker.
Shall I go first? A couple of weeks ago, I was attending a conference day on cybersecurity regarding inland navigation. And there are people from, my memory is not as it used to be anymore, people from ENISA speaking. And I asked a question about ISO 27000 and something, if this would be the appropriate standard. And the answer was, to a degree, yes, but most of it, no. Unfortunately, I don't exactly remember the motivation for that, but it maybe it's wise for you to have a conversation with these people.
I have on a weekly basis.
So it would be fine to have a uniform statement, a standard statement on how far ISO 27000 helps with respect to cyber security.
Roberto. Yeah, just to come back to a few things about the security calls. Indeed, as Alexei has mentioned, also Miguel, there are different security calls addressing, like, for instance, data, like data spaces, also industrial data spaces. We organized also with the European Commission an event with EFRA, with Factories of the Future, last year about resilience of manufacturing system. So there is a community growing. Considering also the startup, there are matchmaking events that EXO does also to facilitate, mainly for cybersecurity, and this also, you know, it's an open event to everybody. And then I would like to comment about the standard certification. So clearly standards are very good for interoperability. There is the European cybersecurity certification framework now that should help, let's say, but is on a voluntary basis. Certification is not a silver bullet. So what it's good to foster maybe practice for assessment, continuous evaluation along, you know, the life cycle of the products. So this is, I think that is very important. I fully agree with you that we need to have a single approach where the 28 member states and then all the EFTA countries can really work together to simplify the things, especially for SMEs and for the common, for all the companies and the market.
Okay, time is up. I have the impression that you know, the discussion has just started and you want more, which is of course the purpose, to leave you hungry for more discussion, and which you can continue then afterwards. That's a purpose of these events, actually, to continue networking and on discussing. There is a cluster room that we have downstairs, number 11, I think, where there would be colleagues who are involved in these topics that will be sitting there all day, you know, therefore to discuss with you with a bit more time and to gather feedback. The consultation, as I said before, has been extended. It is still open until 4th of October. So, you know, your comments are welcome. Just to finish, I mean, we've touched upon many issues, but I was quite interested in a couple of points Alexei made of a very practical nature when it comes to calls about the balance between breadth and depth, and also on what it takes for a proposer to have access to information. And so this kind of practicalities is also useful to us when preparing work programs. I mean, they might be specific to the cyber area, or they might be more general, but don't hesitate. You know, it's important to address big challenges, but also this kind of practical input is also quite useful for the Commission. With that, I would like to thank our 3 speakers today, and all of you for your participation. And as I said, I encourage you to continue the discussion amongst yourselves and with the Commission colleagues if you so want downstairs. Thank you very much.